Welcome to the Natural Podcast of Selborne, hosted by Gilbert White's House and Gardens. I am Kimberly James, the collections manager here at Gilbert White's House and Gardens. I love Gilbert White, but wish I knew a little bit more about the natural world he describes. So, we are here to take a deep dive into Gilbert White's pioneering 1789 book, The Natural History of Selborne, to learn more about the natural world both in the 18th century and today. We will talk to some amazing experts and all become a little more Gilbert.
Verge of the forest, as it is now circumscribed, are three considerable lakes, two in Oak Hanger, of which I have nothing particular to say, and one called Binns or Beans Pond, which is worthy the attention of a naturalist or a sportsman.
Hello, and welcome to a very warm Selborne today. We are heading back to Woolmer today to look at letter 8, which is all about Woolmer Pond, which sounds very appetizing on a day like today to be sitting near a pond. In this letter, we have more talk about Woolmer and the neighbouring forests in the area, but towards the end of the letter, Gilbert focuses more in on the ponds and the lakes that frequent his neighbourhood. Now, I am not sure when a pond stops being a pond and starts being a lake, but all the lakes that he describes in these letters are called ponds. I think this might be similar to in the first letter when Gilbert White describes the South Downs as mountains. I think it's something to do with perspective and context here. We don't really have huge lakes in this part of Hampshire, so a big pond is a lake to us, just as a big hill is a mountain to us. We have some talk of aquatic life, fish and eels. Gilbert makes a point about the sandy soil of Woolmer being the cause of poor quality of life in some of these ponds for the fish and eels that live there. He then goes on to talk about how all cattle seem to all innately be drawn to ponds such as Woolmer Pond to cool themselves off in the summer. Sounds like a good idea to me. On a day like today, they all get belly deep into the water during the hottest part of the day, stay there for a few hours, and then once the cool evening draws in, they come out. Gilbert also describes how these cattle's dung, obviously they're freely depositing it into the lake, actually is very beneficial to the biodiversity of the pond. And from this little paragraph, we get one of my favourite Gilbert White quotes, and he says, "Thus nature, who is a great economist, converts the recreation of one animal to the support of another," which is basically another instance in the book, and we'll talk about this, I think, later on in letters down the line, where Gilbert White gets this title, the father of ecology, this idea of everything being linked and every animal supporting other animals, whether that be aquatic life, cattle, human life, or insects and plants. It's all connected, and yeah, nature is a great economist. He closes the letter by really focusing in on Woolmer Pond, describing its size and the wildlife that you're likely to see there in the 18th century. He also talks about a hoard of coins found in the pond. This is quite a common occurrence for this part of the world. Woolmer and Alice Holt forests were both very well populated by Romans and by Iron Age settlements. So there's quite a lot of archaeology being found in those areas. There was a really big hoard found in Blackmore in the 1870s, which uncovered a vast Roman coin collection. Gilbert doesn't really go into a lot of detail about this hoard, but it would have likely been either Roman or Bronze Age coins. And yeah, you can see Gilbert's all his different interests sort of merging into one here, where the natural historian and the historian's interest is piqued. Of course, he talks about the bird life of Woolmer Pond, but what interests me and what I am looking forward to talking to my guest about is the pond's reptile and amphibian inhabitants, as Woolmer Pond is one of the sites that the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Reptile and Amphibian group record from. So I have got in touch with recorder Jon Cranfield, who hopefully will tell us a little bit more about all the amphibians and reptiles we might find in Woolmer and beyond in the Hampshire and Isle of Wight area.
A circumstance respecting these ponds, though by no means peculiar to them, I cannot pass over in silence, and that is that instinct by which in summer all the kine, whether oxen, cows, calves, or heifers, retire constantly to the water during the hotter hours. During this great proportion of the day they drop much dung, in which insects nestle, and so supply food for the fish, which would be poorly subsisted but from this contingency. Thus nature, who is a great economist, converts the recreation of one animal to the support of another.
Well, welcome, Jon, to the Natural Podcast of Selborne. And thank you for joining us on a very warm afternoon.
Yeah.
I think we start off with, could you just tell us a little bit about the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Reptile and Amphibian group?
Yeah, certainly. The Hampshire and Isle of Wight Amphibian Reptile Group. We are a group of volunteers. So most of the people have other day jobs, and so people volunteer in the evenings and at weekends to go out and survey for the county's amphibians and reptiles, which are collectively known as herpetofauna. So amphibians, newts, toads, frogs, and the reptiles is our snakes and lizards. And there's also things like terrapins and stuff like that that live across the county. And we was sort of formed in 2018, and we previous to that there was a Hampshire group, and now we've included the Isle of Wight, and we have members on the island, and basically it's like a subscription, so people can join the group and they pay a membership fee, and then they can come and join events, and they can come out and do surveys with some of the more experienced people, licensed surveyors and things. And we're all really about getting out there and finding animals in the wild, basically. And so we have a number of sites. I think Gilbert White's is one of those where we go and visit ponds, or we go and visit the environments around Gilbert White's, for example. We look for reptiles basking underneath things that we set out in the sun. And then we record that information, and it goes into a database which can then be used by land managers to learn more about their sites in terms of what reptiles and amphibians are there. And then they can use that information to plan habitat management. So habitat management is important. So wildlife sort of thrives on disturbance. So the more you leave undisturbed, it becomes darker, overgrown, and of course we lose our reptiles that like the heat. And also likewise, ponds, if they're overgrown, you start to lose the amphibians because they go there to breed and they need the warmth and the open sunlight. It allows plants to grow. So in the water, so then newts can lay their eggs. Likewise, when you have tadpoles, they need warm water to grow quickly, so they don't get predated by other animals like newts and other birds and things like that. So it's important to manage stuff, and it's really important to do it in a sympathetic way. And one of the best ways of making sure that that happens is that learning more about a site, where the animals live, where they are at different times of the year, so you can then plan that management. It's vital, but then when it's unsympathetic, you can wipe out animals as well quite quickly. So it's the opposite of neglect. If you overmanage and manage the wrong places at the wrong time, we can lose our amphibians and reptiles as well. So that's what it's all about in terms of the surveying. And it's open to everyone. I guess
Mm.
it's 16 onwards, really, to whatever age, retirees and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, and other activities that we do include sort of events. So we
Hmm.
bring animals, maybe not on a day like today, which is really, really hot. But
No, but our nature day a couple of weeks ago was perfect. It was cold and
yeah,
wet for a an afternoon in May, and you brought along a lot of great creatures, which I
yeah.
think
So we can.
were thriving.
Yeah, I mean, 'cause that's the key thing because we basically bring animals to the public, so the public
Mm.
come to our stall and they can see toads and they can see common frogs and
Hmm.
grass snakes are often a favourite, especially
Hmm.
if you get a big female grass snake in a tank.
Yeah.
But you've got to look after them, and when
Mm.
it's warm like this, it's really difficult to keep them from overheating, really.
Of
So
course, yeah.
like you say, when it's
Yeah.
cooler,
Yeah.
you can display them and they're quite happy. But it's important for people to meet the animals, to see what they look like and be inspired by. I've always remembered catching my first great crested newt when I was younger. Um, it's you catch the smooth newts, little brown things,
Yeah.
and then you pull out the net and you end up one a big black salamander about 6 inches long, and
Yeah.
it was a prized item, even though it was possibly illegal to back then in the 80s even. So, but it was
Yeah.
very inspiring for me to see those animals, and that's
Yeah.
we display those animals under license, so we have a
Mm.
license to hold them for educational displays, and they go back to where they were found.
Mm.
Obviously, with permission, we take them, but then they go back within 48 hours. And it's we have smooth newts and palmate newts in tanks and things, so people can see them. Actually, that some of the events we've had newts actually laying eggs in the
Oh,
tanks.
really?
Give them some vegetation, which
Yeah.
in there to provide a bit of cover and a bit of shade. But then the females, if they've already mated, they're looking for somewhere to lay their eggs, and
Like
female
perfect.
carefully fold a leaf over with their hind feet, and
Yeah.
people can see that on the stalls, which is really good. And we do pass out a lot of information. We've got
Mm.
leaflets and things. We're online, so we're on Instagram, I believe. We have a website, so I think
Great.
hiwag.org.uk. People can get to see what we've got there, and they can find out more about becoming members and also joining in with some of the projects that we do.
Oh, that's great. And I think the educational work is so important, particularly because I don't think that people sometimes realize the what kind of reptiles and amphibians that we have in the country. I mean, we're not, when you think of things like snakes in particular, and people don't think of this country as a place that has snakes. So I think the fact that we're able to show off that we do have snakes, and you'll find a snake very easily if you know what you're looking for. And I think they're also something that's really interesting for children and a great gateway
Yeah, yeah.
animal for children to get into nature, which brings us on nicely to ask you a little bit about your background and how you got into the reptile and amphibian game.
Well, it's been it's been about 40 years really. Pardon me. It's about when I was quite young, under 10, I used to keep. We used to have garden ponds. My dad
Mm.
had goldfish, and we used to dig ponds in our garden, and we had common frogs spawn there, and smooth newts mainly.
Hmm.
And we used to rear frogs from tadpoles, and we used to take them into school. It's something that's not doesn't happen that often nowadays,
Mm.
but it's something that is really key for kids to see the life cycle of the frog up close. I suppose there's online sources of, you can see that. So I was very early age, I was exposed to amphibians. So we had garden ponds and we had frogs and toads and all that sort of stuff. And then I quickly developed like bird watching. I was very mad on watching birds and stuff. And then when we moved home, we went up to the local woodlands, and my dad obviously has also been a lover of all things
Mm.
herpetofauna, amphibians, and reptiles too. He had similar stories, bringing home lots of tadpoles and things with his with my nan in the bathtub at home. But he spotted a piece of corrugated iron, and it was me and my brother was with him, and we were bird watching, and we were walking, and he got us to sort of stand on either side of the iron, and he lifted it up, and there was two very large adult male slow worms, and that was when my interest in reptiles was sparked, and I really didn't go bird watching anymore. I was looking down on the ground rather than up in the trees, um, and I was searching for slow worms all around where we used to live, which our house was built on what effectively was a water meadow, and then the remaining habitat was gradually being developed. And before that, it was my childhood stamping ground. Basically, we used to go and look for snakes and lizards and find great crested newts in attenuation reservoirs nearby
Mm.
and stuff like that. And then the development came, and it was like that's what sparked my interest at the time. I think it was frog life that was
Mm.
running the ARG groups, and I became part of the Essex ARG group back in
Mm.
the 90s. And it was all about really flagging it up in planning. You've got protected species here. You're going to have to look after them and make sure they're mitigated for and things like that.
Mhm.
And that's where I then went to university and I studied marine biology, and
Mhm.
so I went down sort of a marine mammal sort of avenue, and there was the whale watching boats in Tenerife. We had turtles and things like that, and I came back from university, and I basically stumbled into a job for basically an ecological consultancy close to where my mum and dad lived, and I then went to Kent, and I was collecting slow worms, lizards, and grass snakes. And it wasn't a good experience because basically it was very much lip service. So we were rescuing animals and chucking them over a fence, is what you normally see along motorways and things like that.
Mm.
I didn't really like it. But the following year, I was recommended to a consultancy that was looking for a new ecologist. And I
Mm.
had given a talk as part of the ARGs
Mm.
about as Essex ARG. I gave a talk about great crested newts
Mm.
in Rochford. I think it was in Rochford. And a guy there was from the Wildlife Trust, and they were contacted. The Wildlife Trust were contacted because this consultancy was looking for a new ecologist, um, and he recommended me because he heard me talk about great crested newts. And so at that time, I called them back and got an interview. Actually, my dad remembers driving me up to Peterborough. I don't think I drove back then, or maybe I'm not sure. Anyway, but I was
Mm.
driven up by my dad, and the guy's name was Dr. Robert Stebbings, and he's basically big in the bat world, but very recently, he used to talk about stuff about his research that he used to do in the 60s, I think it was,
Mhm.
60s and 70s about snakes and stuff. And going up to his offices, which was basically his house, and he was a big common frog fan. And so, whereas the previous job, I didn't really want to be anything to do with it. With this, he said, "Oh, we want a new ecologist. What you say goes. If you've got any issues, I will back you up and all that sort of stuff."
Mm.
And what really clinched it was that he took me into his garden after the interview,
Mm.
and he showed me an oversized garden pond with, I think it was upwards of 400 clumps of spawn in it, and he showed me how he was counting it, and he was using a torch that we normally use for newt surveys, a big beam, and he was using that to count the number of clumps through this 3 or 4 layers of clumps.
Mm.
So when the new clump came, he knew it was a new clump because it was much tighter, and he could count them. And there was 400 clumps, and I was so impressed by that. I actually said, "Oh, my dad's outside. Could I come and get him to see it?"
Yeah.
Because I don't think my dad's ever seen it as well in a garden pond. And from that day on, I was working with Bob, and I worked with various people, lots of different projects, mostly in the development sector. So a lot of people have their own opinions about development and how it can be very damaging, which it can be,
Mm.
but with consultancy and some of the work I've done over the years, so it's 26 years now I've been working as a specialist ecological consultant, but I still have a grounding in volunteering as well. So
Mm.
I locally I live in New Alresford, and we have the eel house that I help organise. And but this year has been very busy with newt surveys, so I've been doing a lot of late nights, setting traps
Mm.
and coming back in the early morning. And I think we've found several hundred, or we counted several hundred newts over this season, which was really good.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, so I've been working as an ecological consultant, and I'm also a recorder or the recording officer for HIWARG. Generally speaking, what I mentioned before, so we have lots of surveys out for reptiles across the whole county, as well as the Isle of Wight. And I generally don't go and do them myself. I sort of collate the information and do the sort of like agreements with the people like HBIC, so Hampshire
Mm.
Biodiversity Information Centre, and also the Isle of Wight. They've got a data centre as well. And I sort of collate the information and send that information rather than doing the surveys as a volunteer, because I basically do it as my day job.
Mm.
So, but I do like supporting ARG UK and HIWARG and all, and I think there's over 40 groups across the country.
Wow.
So, from one person being a contact to very active groups that have got recording systems and projects, and there's projects across the country which are working with Natural England and Herefordshire. They have the Ice Age Pond project. I think it's Herefordshire.
Mm.
So there's all these wonderful projects that are happening through the voluntary sector, which is the RUK network. And we're doing similar things with HIWARG. Um, RUK itself is the charitable organisation that helps coordinate all the different groups.
Mm.
And they have staff and they have trustees. And so effectively, HIWARG and all the other ARGs are a member of a charity organisation.
Mm.
And it's all, I think it's described as the grassroots of conservation for herpetofauna, really. So,
Wow.
and it's something that I've always supported
Mm.
since the 90s, and I'll probably continue to support it as long as I'm able to.
Well, we're big fans here at Gilbert White's as well. You've helped us a lot with our own ponds and doing surveys of our own newts and coming to our events and sharing your great knowledge. So we're a big fan, and what a fascinating career! It, everything from birds to marine biology to um, amphibians and reptiles. So it's
Yeah, yeah.
amazing. So one of the reasons that we got you in for this episode is because of the Amphibian and Reptiles group involvement with Woolmer Pond. And I know it's not an area that you spent a lot of time in, but Woolmer as a place is quite special, isn't it, for its reptiles and amphibians? It's got quite a few of them, I seem to think.
Yeah, I mean it's quite famous in Hampshire because it's got 12 of the 13 native amphibians and reptiles.
Mm.
The only one that isn't there is the reintroduced water frog, which is the
Ah,
northern pool frog, which has been
okay.
reintroduced to Norfolk, which is where it once lived, which went extinct in the 90s. So all the other species you can find are in and around Woolmer Forest,
Mm.
and possibly in and around Woolmer Pond, which is mentioned in the letter.
Yeah.
Um, and it's quite a famous site for that reason. And the other thing that Natterjack toads, which is possibly, is it the only site, the breeding site in Hampshire, really? I think the other one is just slightly outside the border. And I think it is doing well. And I think there has been a lot of conservation work by the likes of Amphibian Reptile Conservation Trust, and John Buckley, who's had a long history of looking after natterjacks at Woolmer. And I believe there is surveys that we do for reptiles in and
Mm.
around parts of Woolmer. I'm not sure. I think it's Blackmore and places like that.
Hmm.
And it's, yeah, so you've got smooth snakes, sand lizards, adders, grass snakes, slow worms. viviparous lizards, are all in the mix because it's such a varied habitat. You've got, meres,
Yeah.
ponds and woodlands and heathland, and it's all a real good
Yeah.
mosaic of habitats, and it's really important. So HiWARG members, I'm sure, volunteer because there is some restriction as well because of the MOD and stuff like
Yes,
that.
yeah, it's an
Um,
active military site, so
yeah,
yeah, it's
so which is funny, isn't it? Because military sites are often some of the best wildlife
mm,
sites because people
yeah,
generally don't go there that often,
yeah,
and they also get blown up or driven over.
yeah.
So disturbance, there's
Again,
disturbance is needed. Um, there's the famous Salisbury Plain, with the tank ruts with fairy shrimps, for example. So you have the tank
um,
ruts. One of my dreams would be to create ponds with explosives. That would be amazing. Second World War bombs being dropped, around London and Epping Forest, for example. A lot of the bomb craters from the Second
mm,
World War are still ponds now, basically.
really? Oh
So
wow.
there is a pond in Epping Forest called the Bomb Hole, and I'm sure there's one in Basildon. And it's all to do with,
Mm,
when the Luftwaffe came in
mm,
and dropped their bomb to get back home, and they exploded. And from time to time, you used to find, the RSPB and other people used to find unexploded bombs, and
mm,
they have the controlled explosion, and it's basically a perfectly shaped bowl, and it's wonderful if they could just leave it to fill with water.
mm,
Um, so yeah, so the military side of things, obviously it's military you often associate with blowing things up and damaging stuff, but actually the damage and disturbance it can be really important, and particularly for natterjacks, they do need that sort of sandy, bare sort of habitat,
mm,
and ponds need to be really quite shallow and warm and not have lots of other predators, so lots of
mm,
other newts and other frogs and things like that. They don't do that well. So
yeah,
ones which are dry are pretty good. So it's yeah, I mean, we do visit it from time to time, but not we can't do
yeah.
it regularly. And I think it's if the red flags are up, don't go on.
No, 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 no. And that's interesting as well, what you're saying about the sandy soil, because in the letter, Gilbert White talks about that's what makes the pond or the ponds around that area. He used the word unhealthy or hungry, isn't it? That's the word that he uses, and obviously that's beneficial for some amphibians, but maybe not for the fish that Gilbert White's talking about.
Yeah, he mentioned things like was it tench and carp and
Mm,
eels and things like that. Um, and the sandy bottom. I've read recently, about how they're trying to restore Woolmer Pond back to that sandy bottom because I'm
mm,
guessing there's lots of silt and leaf litter that's in there, um,
okay.
which in a way it's a peat cutting. It's that's how it was formed. They used
Mm,
to take the peat that was there for fuel, I'm guessing, and that's what formed the lake itself. So it's
mm,
quite a big lake, and it, he describes it very sandy and not great for fish, um, which is interesting in itself because fish for other amphibians, so common frog, great crested newt, they don't do well with fish. Common toad will be fine. They have
mm,
all their life stages are distasteful. So the tadpoles, particularly, the fish quickly learn not to feed on them. And if you look
mm,
across the pond and you see these big black masses of tadpoles, they're most likely to be common toad. Um, so I'm not sure what the fish status is of warmer ponds,
no,
but um, I probably guess that the fishing probably hasn't taken off and it hasn't been a fishing lake. Uh,
no.
but yeah, it's a habitat which is as important as the small puddle ponds that common frogs will breed in, if you know what I
Mm.
mean. So it's yeah, it's great.
No, it's and in terms of your work today, I mean, are there any particular challenges that you face in terms of cording? Or I know that obviously you're a volunteer-led organization and everybody is struggling for people these days, but are there any other challenges or that you face with your work?
Well, my work as a professional or the voluntary side of things,
Well, either really,
it's
whichever.
intertwined. It's really interesting because yeah, the recent legislation that's been brought in is all about trying to reduce delays to development.
Mm,
And in some ways, when things go very late on in a project, things do get delayed. And it's
mm,
unfortunate that some people think that, particularly like the great crested newt, um, can cause delays. And that's mostly down to how we respond to finding the animal on a site. Um, and of course, there are, across Hampshire, with great crested newts aren't particularly common. The majority of Hampshire there are no great crested newts, and I think the challenge is now it's more
mm.
strategic. So rather than do it site by site,
Yeah.
we've now got things which are modelled where they are. And I.O.W was involved in the consultation for that, and we've highlighted the best populations of newts in the county, and you can. I think Basingstoke at Popley Ponds is a very important population.
Okay.
There's one at Romsey, there's Southampton Common, and then there's a few other populations which are flagged up in the system, basically.
Mm,
Um, so the challenge is there is, conserving the animals in this changing sort of legislative sort of aspect around development. And development
mm,
is a small fraction of the countryside, and it's unfortunate that a lot of the more important or the most important wildlife areas are targeted for development um, because of policy, basically.
mm.
I know that grey newts are perceived as the villain in the nature conservation pantomime. It was phrased. I think they're heroes because even with the strategic license, it's now over the last 6 years we've had 5,000 ponds in England created across the country because of great
Mm,
crested newts. They support a wealth of other species, so plants, fungi, and other invertebrates, and other species that live in those ponds. So I think since the 90s to the early noughties, we had a net increase across the country of 50,000 ponds. So it gives you a perspective of how many ponds have been created because of great
mm,
crested newts. When it comes down to volunteer groups, though, what we're finding is we really do need to connect with people in terms of different ages, so particularly the
mm.
younger age, so sort of the youth age. And I think recently ArgueUK have established what's called a youth panel, which I think is 18 to 25, I think.
Okay.
I think that's that age group. So students at university and stuff have formed a youth
Mm,
panel, which is like a parallel thing for the ARG network. And it's trying to get younger people involved. And I think our high ARG events, we meet families, we meet children and all that sort of stuff. And we also do events at schools and we do events at Gilbert White's and things like that. But I think we're finding, the core activity is going out looking for animals on, heathland sites, which maybe
mm.
most people now aren't really interested in. But what we're hoping is that we can connect with people and look around their own communities, basically. So in an allotment or a churchyard or just their school grounds,
Yeah.
So the challenges is finding new members really to take on those tasks. But I think, with the youth panel, we've got an internship at ArgueUK, and I think an intern is coming down to Hampshire for July. And it's all to do with social media and all that sort of stuff.
Mm.
So we'll hopefully be doing some filming of slow worms and
Mm.
um, TikTok, Snapchat, all these different sort of platforms. Hopefully, we can inspire people. But I still believe taking people out to find the animals or to bring the animals to the
Mm.
people, like on a stall. Great crested newts, they're just fantastic. They're a wonderful looking animal.
They're
They've
so
been
good.
especially in the breeding season when you have a big
Yeah.
male great crested newt in a tub, a clear plastic tub that people
Mm.
can see. Um, I think that's quite inspiring for kids, particularly.
Yeah.
Um, it's just it's just the way it goes, really, and also combining with other groups, so other interest groups. So working with invertebrate groups, for example. So when we do amphibian surveys, we'll find water beetles, or if we go out on a reptile survey, which I've been doing over a number of years, is finding glowworms.
Oh,
So,
really?
and only recently, this last month, I went down to
Yeah.
Somerset and we was walking over fields and we found glowworm larvae. Um, and they're
Wow.
on what's called walkabout. So
Okay.
they're just walking about looking for somewhere to pupate and turn into their adult form.
Yeah.
And you just find them walking around looking for reptiles or assessing newt ponds or whatever. Um, and I think a couple of years ago, I did a big reptile survey in Hampshire for Natural England. And some
Mm.
of the sites we found glowworm larvae under the reptile refugia. And last year I went back to one of the sites near me, and we found glowing female glowworms last summer.
Wow.
We're going to go back out there this summer, and we're going
Yeah.
to target a further area that we know in Kingsworthy. And because these glowworms are, they're just as special
Mm.
as seeing a great crest newt. You can't
Yeah.
fathom it. It's a bright green glowing thing in the field. It's
Yeah.
not like what you see on holiday, but it's still
Yeah.
inspiring.
No,
And
I've never seen one. I mean, we're so lucky here because we have our own pond and we do have all three newts in our garden. So I have seen my good share of great crested newts, but I don't think I've ever seen a glowworm. So I'll be
yeah, it's something to
um
look out for around the
yeah.
grounds. I mean, it's woodland edge sort of species. If you've got lots of snails,
Mm.
if you've got low light, low levels of light pollution.
Mm.
Um, and I think I found it at Branding Common, you see. So we found these little larvae on the underside of the reptile refugia. It's something to look out for. And
Yeah.
that's the sort of thing that we can sort of connect with other
Mm.
interest groups. It's a bit difficult, I think, for, children to come out at night, but then
Yes, yeah. Well,
they do. The country
yeah.
parks have glowworm walks, and it's sort of I think glowworms live in a very similar habitat to
Mm.
slowworms. They live in this underneath corrugated iron.
Mm.
They eat the same food. They eat snails and slugs. So it's a like a synergy there that
Yeah.
we could possibly develop. It's the work of because we're always seen as like a very small group of animals. We do have a large number of charities
Mm.
dealing with a small group of animals. And I
Yeah.
think it's connecting with the likes of the RSPB and um, Bug Life and other
Mm.
people, butterfly conservation. It's where we can, because
Yeah.
basically you're competing for the same resources as
Mm.
people. So
Yeah.
I think it would be really good to combine forces in many ways.
Amazing.
So
So it's very warm today. So this particular quote came popped out at me when I was looking at the letter. White talks about how cows, and not just cows, oxen, and all other sorts of cattle,
yeah,
have this sort of innate sense of walking into the water and cooling off. So I wanted to ask you, have you ever seen cattle do this? And do you actually think it's beneficial having cows pooping in the water? Um,
I yeah, I mean, because basically he's assuming that when you see cowpats, you see flies and all that all
mhm,
over them, and I think it's to do really uh, so animal dung into water provides nutrients, and it's like anywhere where it can be bad,
mhm,
but then it also feeds algae, and
mhm,
then that feeds other invertebrates in the water.
mhm,
Um, and I think there is an element of truth there that they do help to seed that pond, which apparently is quite low in nutrients, I would guess.
mhm,
So then it would provide that habitat for other animals to live on the plants that grow on those nutrients. And I think it's like you know goldfish farming, for example. If you're farming goldfish or other types of fish, you have stock ponds that you put manure in to grow Daphnia. So they because of the algae, the Daphnia grows, and then you can feed that to the fish to grow them on in fish farms and things like that. So I think that's where that the other thing is with livestock is that they're a really effective way of managing ponds. So Freshwater Habitats Trust, they do like grazing some of the ponds that they are managing. Um, I have taken inspiration from Freshwater Habitats Trust about that, and I manage a reserve in Essex, which is quite a dry
Mm.
county, but we have a series of ponds that are 20 years old, or we've dug some new ones this year. But we manage the site with grazing horses, basically. So we have horses that come onto the site,
Yeah.
um, and the poaching of the edges of the pond provides micro habitats and things like
Mm.
that. But you got to be careful not to
Mm.
overgraze them. And some of our ponds are pretty overgrazed, but we're going to be fencing off some of it to try and reduce that.
Mm.
Um, but I think what was really fascinating to see is that we dug these ponds as part of the strategic license for Great Crested Newts, and we didn't put any new plants in them. And the horses, and also probably
Mm.
windborne or ducks or whatever, but the horses walk in the established ponds and they bring the plants over to the new ponds. And we've got a
Ah.
set of ponds which were built in 2020, just before
Mm.
lockdown in COVID. And those ponds are literally a stone's throw away from each other,
Mm.
but they're really different. They were dug at the same time, but they're completely different
Interesting.
characters. And it's to do with, the influence of grazing livestock, the substrate, how deep
Mm.
they are, how big they are. But then it's been brilliant using the livestock. So we have horses available. That's what we use.
Mm.
Um, we could use cattle in the future, and it's a way of opening up those ponds. And if you think about it, it's the herbivores that went to wallows, wallow in
Mm.
holes and stuff like that. And that's where sort of rewilding with like pigs and cattle and
Mm.
bison and all that sort of stuff, they create these wallows that turn into ponds eventually. And of course, they go to watering holes. So where there's
Mm.
water, they go to it, they poach the edges and all the rest of it. And it does create some pretty fantastic habitats for specialist sort of invertebrates and plants, which people don't generally notice or know much about. They see a pond which is poached and it's like, oh, it's just, it's
Mm.
damaged. But actually, I always say that, damage and disturbance is pretty good for nature. It needs to have a regular rotation of
Yeah.
that damage to reset succession, for example. And I think it's the only problem with livestock is that you can't control what they do. You can be
Yeah.
bit more specific if you use a mechanical digger, for example.
Mm. Yeah.
But it's been a revelation really because my dad has been the manager of the site with me, and he's had some ill health, and but then we've developed a relationship with a local grazier, and the horses come in periodically at different times of the year, and they just knock back all the vegetation and the invasive or vigorous weeds and stuff like that.
Mm.
Um, and the dung is there and it provides invertebrates and things like that, which is what he's probably saying in the letter is
Yeah.
what he's observing. Of course, if you have lots and lots and lots of animals, then it becomes a problem and you get too many
Sure.
nutrients in there and too
Yeah.
much damage. So, but I think that's what he's pointing to there. Uh,
Great. And a
Supply
good,
food for the fish.
yeah, and a good way to cool off. So our last question is a way that our listeners could be more Gilbert. What's your idea?
Well, I mean, because Gilbert White is obviously going out and observing things, and I think to be more Gilbert really is to get out into to volunteer and to get out into the countryside and go and look, really.
Mm.
I mean, you don't have to go out in the countryside. You can start off in your garden.
Mm.
Um, we've moved here, this house here, and I've noticed particular jumping spiders, and I'm interested in those, and in my previous house, I had swift boxes, um, and I moved another part of the town, and I was worried that there weren't any swifts. And only like today, the swifts are flying overhead and
Mm.
screaming. So I'm hoping to get some swift boxes out, to try and encourage them to breed on my new house. So it takes that observation, of things around you, and I think we've got an amazing array of apps and things that you can use.
Yeah.
One of my two favorite apps is Merlin,
Hmm.
which is the bird one, and I
Yeah.
can you can train your ear to hear
Hmm.
different species. And now, particular species I now know from the app, I
Yeah.
can hear them
A
everywhere I
mile
go,
off.
really. And the other one is Flora Incognita, which I'm using to identify plants that are grown in my front lawn.
Yeah.
And then you basically, I mean, it's not completely accurate, it can make mistakes, but it's a good basis
Mm.
to log that sort of thing. And in modern day, people are always on their phones. You can use your phone to record stuff, photography. Everyone can be a photographer.
Mm.
If you see something unusual, if you're walking along a river and you see a snake, you can report it to somewhere like the Record Pool, which is recordpool.org.uk, I think. So yeah, being more like Gilbert is to just get out and then observe
Yeah.
and
Have a
find
look.
those animals, or
Yeah.
plants. I mean,
Yeah.
people have different interests.
They do. Well, go from birds to amphibians to marine life and back to amphibians again.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Brilliant.
my work at the eel house in Alresford, we managed to find. We were doing some, for the white claw crayfish. We had to protect the white
Mm.
claw crayfish, but we found a freshwater sponge on the side of the eel house, which
Wow.
took me back to my marine biology days.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was in fresh water, which
Yeah.
I never knew there was freshwater sponges. And there's a lot of debate. I mean, maybe Gilbert White might be part of that debate about whether they're animals or plants or something completely different. Um, but again, I observed it on
Yeah.
the side of the eel house, one of the runs there. Well, they dewatered it. They put
Mm.
like an aqua dam up, and I could walk through each one. And I
Mm.
just looked at the side of the wall. It's been there for 200 years, the
Yeah.
brickwork, and I noticed this freshwater sponge, which I never would have known was there. If you're in that sort of situation, at springtime, listening out for uh, calling toads or calling frogs.
Mm.
Um, if you're out on the heathland in the spring, you see perhaps adders in combat, or in the New Forest, you might find, or actually not too far away from you, you may in the summer hear European water frogs now. So, and
Oh, yeah,
all
yeah.
it takes is your phone, take
Yeah.
a recording, and you can send that and get that identified. Um, and it's just knowing where to send stuff, basically.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing is for people to reconnect with nature and do what Gilbert was doing and noticing things and making notes. If journaling, there's
Mm.
I think in France, I think they have places where people get together and they ban all mobile phones, and they basically sit there and they do stuff, crafting or
Oh,
journaling or
wow.
stuff like that,
That
which
sounds
is,
idyllic.
yeah. So it's the opposite side of using your phones, but
Mm.
everyone's got a phone.
Yeah.
And I do use mine quite a lot. It's useful. Um,
Yeah.
so that's the modern age, isn't it? Whereas Gilbert was,
Absolutely.
what was he using? A quill?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
yeah, you would have been. Yeah, absolutely.
and parchment, I would guess.
Yeah, well, I say he had a lot of notebooks, so yeah, so it would be um definitely analog working compared
Yeah.
to today. Well, thank you so much, John, for all your time. I'm going to let you get back to the sunshine now, and
I hope that's okay.
it was so good. Thank you so much.
So, Woolmer Pond, so called, I suppose, for eminence sake, is a vast lake for this part of the world, containing in its whole circumference 2,646 yards, or very near a mile and a half.
Hello, so this is the collections part of the podcast. I have gone with a book, and I can't believe that we haven't gone with a book before, considering how much of our collection is actually our library, and this
it's the first book that I've chosen. This book is British Reptiles, and it is by Thomas Bell. It was published in 1839, I think. And the reason that I picked it, obviously it's about British reptiles, which is very much what we've been talking about all afternoon with Jon. But this book is particularly special because the author lived in this house, and this is not Gilbert White we're talking about. Thomas Bell lived in this house as well. So Thomas Bell was a zoologist and a dentist, but for the purpose of this conversation, a zoologist. And he bought the house off the White family in the 1830s as somewhere for his family to live part-time, and then eventually it became his full-time home after he retired. He bought it because he was a fan of Gilbert White. He bought it because it was Gilbert White's home, and he added Bell's library, a library to the house, which we still remember him by today. And yeah, had a really big impact not only on the history of this house, but the history of British natural history. So I am delighted to add his British Reptiles book, which is beautifully illustrated. I was trying to find out who the illustrator is, and having a flick through, I can't immediately say, because one of the illustrators that he worked with, though I'm fairly sure not on this book, although look at this, beautiful illustrations of and woodcuts of the different reptiles and amphibians, because one of the illustrators that he worked with was Edward Lear, you know, the Limerick writer. I'm almost certain, because these woodcuts and the style of them, that this is not Lear's work, but yeah, this is a really, really beautiful book. I've kind of currently got it open on blind worms, and there's all sorts of fantastic illustrations and text, including some rather interesting vignettes. There's one that I've just seen of a snake being whisked away by some sort of bird of prey. So we will add this into the case behind me, which you might be able to see for those watching. It's got all of the objects in it that we have been talking about since the podcast began at the new year, and it will join its friends in there now. So do come along and have a look at the items, and see you soon.
On the face of this expanse of waters, and perfectly secure from fowlers, lie all day long in the winter season vast flocks of ducks, teals and widgeons of various denominations, where they preen and solesse and rest themselves till towards sunset, when they issue forth in little parties. For in their natural state they are all birds of the night, to feed in the brooks and meadows, returning again with the dawn of the morning.
Thank you so much to Jon for giving us your time. You can find out more about the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Reptile and Amphibian Group online, or by coming along to an event such as Nature Day here at Gilbert White's house, where they are often stall holders. Well worth finding out more about. Please make sure that you have our plants fair on the 13th and 14th of June in your diary. And if you haven't already, come and see our current exhibition, Elements of Nature, which is a celebration of the landscape of the South Downs in art. As always, please like and share, and we will see you soon, either when you next come to visit Gilbert White's house, or in our next episode, where we are visiting another of Gilbert White's favourite haunts, this time Alice Holt Forest. See you soon.